ended up hospitalized from the stress, I realized that was not the definition of success. And I drew a line under that old, and I said, I've got to now transform this. And that was the birth of my interest in Ayurveda, in fitness, in understanding body composition, and commencing my health journey and my transformation to empower others as well.
Ronnie, we're sorry to hear the traumas that you faced, but we often hear in life that we are what we eat. What exactly is meant by that? Because I know I enjoy the odd burger or two every now and the odd milkshake and the odd soda pop, but are we really what we eat?
Well, I think a big thing about as we go through this journey of life is a misconception is we go through life forming a relationship to food. And that relationship to food is what we think, I love the taste of that food. So we think it's taste based. But the relationship to that food is way beyond that, is that that food represents certain associations. Like we consume this food when we're celebrating a holiday or when we've passed some exam or it's a birthday or a wedding or whatever it may be. So over time, we form these relationships to food and then we subconsciously just turn to them. And we begin to eat driven by our senses and not understanding what is the role or the function, or using an Ayurvedic term, the dharma of that food inside of us. So if you really understand what's called the dharma and the function of food, then we know how to consume food that's functional and fulfills upon who we are or who we want to be in this world. And if we don't consume food that has a functional role in us, we will be consuming food that is sensually driven to please the senses. And so having understood that, I got to disappear some of the ones that I used to be hooked to.
Yeah. No, I interrupted you so rudely there. We've had some fantastic sessions talking about Dharma and Ayurveda right here on the Great Big Indian Wellness Show. And you very nicely just explained to us the function that and the roles that food plays in our lives. I'd like to delve in that a little bit more deeply, if I may, with you, Ronnie, because the role or function of food is not simply just to fill our stomachs when we're hungry. There's a little bit more to that than meets the eye, right?
Absolutely. So a big part of the Fit Bankers coaching ethos is we want to understand the relationship of food to ourself and to how we're going to spend the food, which is the expenditure, the exercise, the movement, or the application of it. And the old me would work a very long day in banking. I'd come home at 11 p.m. And because I'm too tired, too busy to cook, I would order a pizza or pasta on the way home. I would consume that late meal after a long day's work, and I would put in me 1,200 or 1,500 calories, and then I go to sleep. And that's a complete mismatch where I've misunderstood the function because I've loaded myself with energy, and then I've gone to sleep. So I've switched off any energy expenditure. So my body converts all that energy late at night into storage. Now, functional or dharmic eating is saying, hang on, I'm going to sleep and my body needs to rest, as do my digestive organs. So I need to eat something that's very easily digestible or that promotes good rest and good sleep, like maybe something high in protein for my muscle recovery. Or if it's early in the morning and I have a long day ahead of me, or I'm going on a trek, or I have some workouts ahead, I want to have something that gives me more sustainable, longer, steady, stable energy, like some oats and nut butter. So understanding the function of food with the activity you're about to engage into, combining that has you really have an experience flow through your day.
There is one thing, Ronnie, that sometimes what is good for us doesn't always taste good. And it requires a certain discipline of which many of us lack. What is your thought on that?
Yeah, well, I say that as we grow up and as I have kids now, I can see how we condition the kids to what we call taste. And taste is a relationship that we have to that food. So we can, I have a kid and people are surprised at my 3 or 4 year old. He loves turmeric and he consumes a lot of turmeric and he has turmeric with his milk and turmeric with everything. But it's part of the conditioning. And so all of us for 20, 30, 40, 50 years or whatever our age is, have just conditioned ourselves to fall in love and form a relationship with food that we call taste. Now we revisit how we formed that, and we have an anagram of understanding what is it about that food we like. So we look at everything from using the anagram taste, the temperature, the associations, the satiety of that food, the texture, and the energy that it brings present to us. So TASTE, temperature, association, satiety, texture, and energy. And if you understand that that's what that food represents is for me, we can now rewire and form a new relationship with foods that serve us. So whether that is something that is protein or whether that's some green salads that serve us, we'll begin to rewire that taste. And our mind is completely transformable. It can be reconditioned. So foods that I thought I can't do without, and foods that I thought, yuck, I don't like the taste of that, or that's rabbit food, I now suddenly love these because I have a strong relationship with the feeling after, and I don't have that carb crash or that lethargy or that fatigue that I have with something that pleases the senses for the first 2-3 minutes and then tanks the energy levels. So I've rewired my relationship to food. And there's a thing we say at the end of the Fit Banker program is, at the end of this, you can eat whatever you want, but what you want changes because you've rewired your relationship to food.
That's incredible. Such a great thing to take away from that today. And it's all about conditioning your mind, your taste buds, and your moods to what you want to eat, which is what we've learned from you today, Ronnie Rich. Ronnie Rich is the CEO and founder of Fit Banker, joining us today live on the Great Big Indian Wellness Show. And if you have just joined us, a very warm welcome to you. Ronnie Rich is talking to me about keeping a healthy lifestyle. And he was a former fat banker, as he's explained to us, and then completely transformed his life through various traumas that he's had. So as we talked about, Ronnie, the functions that food plays in our lives and how it impacts our digestive system and our lifestyles, what about being vegetarian or vegan? Is it really healthy?
So a big conception, a big view was, if you just become vegetarian or you just become vegan, that's healthy. But you could also be vegetarian and you could also be vegan and be unhealthy. So when I was overweight, 108 kgs, 41-inch waist, I was vegetarian all my life, and I don't eat eggs as well. And yet I was unhealthy. And in my family, we have a history of lifestyle disease, chronic heart disease, diabetes, high BP. That was the norm inside of our family. And yet we've all been vegetarian. So the answer is becoming vegetarian or vegan healthy? The answer is no. But you can be vegetarian and you can be vegan, but you want to be a healthy vegetarian or a healthy vegan. That said, you can also stay non-veg if you're non-veg or a pescatarian and still be healthy or unhealthy. And it comes down to what is inside the food. So if you look at what's inside the food are composed of what we call macronutrients, which are proteins, fats, and carbs. And each of those molecules play a different dharmic role inside of us. One gives us a source of energy, another one gives a source of energy and warmth, and a third one is a constructive meta, which means it rebuilds our muscle tissue and fiber, which is the protein. Now, you can get that from vegetarian sources, and you can get that from non-veg sources. And even if you consume non-veg sources, you want to think about, where did that chicken or that cow get its muscle and its protein from? It got it from what it ate, which is normally some form of plant-based source. So it ultimately all does come from plant, but we can make wiser choices. So you can be vegetarian or vegan consuming fried crisps or chips and vegan or vegetarian cakes. That won't add value to the body. Or you can be those, whatever dietary preference, but ensure that is what I'm eating contributing to the value add and well-being of my body, mind, and intellect.
It's very much a mindset thing, Ronnie, whereby you mentioned earlier that we get a fix from eating carbohydrates, and yet you have conditioned your body to accepting food which is actually good for you. There is a transition, a transformative journey that one must go on. Along with it, discipline. Um,
Yeah.
and it's, I have to be honest with you, it's easier said than done, isn't it?
It's easier said than done if you're trying to do it on your own. And all of us need to be quite generous and open to contribution, education, learning, and in our case, coaching. And I went through my own personal development journey, but I had to really acknowledge that all that I knew about nutrition or exercise was not adequate enough to empower me or didn't occur as common sense for me to naturally act into taking the actions or consuming the foods that put me on the right trajectory. So I had to be open to another mindset. Einstein says you can't solve a problem with the same mindset that created it. So why not seek out the services of somebody who is a professional, who's experienced, who's gone through their own journey? And that's what we do. So we actually say that nobody has what's called discipline or willpower. What we say is that those people are inside of a structure or a routine or an accountability or implementation program, the showing up of which inside of that we later call that person's disciplined or that person's willpowered. And so all that's all we provide. We provide an implementation and accountability structure. So if Tony's on my program, every week Tony has a check-in call. Every week Tony has a webinar to learn something, where Tony has a meal plan to look at and say, what am I eating today? And then it becomes easier. And you take away what's called the decision fatigue of the brain, because you allow yourself to be contributed to by professionals, by a structure, by a plan, and by science.
So hang on a second. What you're actually doing is making me feel guilty for eating the wrong things, right? Is that what there is?
Yeah, I don't want you to feel not guilty, but what we say is that the start of any transformation is awareness, right? So awareness is, hang on, why do I keep doing the things I keep doing? And am I interested in, or am I committed to something greater or some other way? So a big part of our coaching is we work on what's your greater why? Like, why does Tony want to transform this? And the definition of the word fit banker is not anything to do with bankers. It's got to do with anyone that banks on their fitness because he or she knows that there are other lives that bank on me being fit too. And it was only when I was hospitalized did I have that realization to say, hang on, there's a lady here who banks on my fitness. There are kids that are yet to be born that will bank on my fitness. There are my parents that bank on my fitness. There are my colleagues at work that bank on my fitness. And I rewired that relationship to myself. And I said, I've got to uphold myself to a certain level and standard. And I created what's called a greater why. And when that why was real for me, then it allows me to spring out of bed every day doing what I do to make a difference to other human beings.
I couldn't challenge that because you answered that so well. That's fantastic, Ronnie. Thank you. What about obesity and fat? And all right, we're overweight, we're obese, and within our community, we sometimes tend to eat the wrong things. We have a sweet tooth. How do we go about reversing obesity and fat within ourselves?
Okay, so Darwin has this theory, which is the animals that survive are not the strongest, but the most adaptable. And as human beings, especially the Indian or Asian community, we need to first ask, why do we eat the foods that we eat and where did they begin? Now, if I go back just to my grandfather's generation, not even great-grandfather, just my grandfather's generation, just for him to get to work and back, he would walk between 5 to 10 kilometers every day to do that. The jobs that 3 generations ago did were very labor-intensive and manual. So what they consumed was first limited to what was available in certain rural areas. They didn't have the options and healthy availability and the food delivery that we have today, or the life spans of food lasting on shelf life or whatever it may be. Number 2 is that they had very manual expenditure. Also, they spent a lot of what they consumed. But in today's world, we have desk-based jobs. We have mind-based stresses and emotions like the mortgage, the kids, which school will they get into? And we are not moving as much physically because we're just tapping away the laptop or on a touch screen. We don't even cook all of our meals, most of us. We tap it on the iPhone and then the doorbell rings and somebody's delivered it. So our energy expenditure has plummeted and our calorie consumption and quality and access to food has tripled. So the first thing we do is we question why and what are we eating? And does it serve today's lifestyle? Does it serve the environment and serve my job? And we rewire that.
That's almost a discipline in itself, really, which is quite nice to learn that from you here today. So obesity and fat, one thing or another, but however, dealing with that, I mean, you've explained it so very well to us. And by the way, if you have just joined us today, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us on the Great Big Indian Wellness Show today. And I'm live in conversation with Ronnie Rich, who is the CEO and founder of Fit Banker, not as in the sense of a fit banker, as it were, but banking on your fitness, as Rod explained to us. We've been talking about the roles that food plays within our lives, the discipline, and what we are is what we eat. However, dealing with obesity and fat is something Ron has just explained to us extremely well, and go about reversing it. Now, if you want to actually boost your energy, Ron, how do we go about gaining that strength and reversing our age? We all want to stay young. We all want to look young and look as fit as what you are and have that reversal, if you like, of the aging process.
Brilliant question. And our body forms a certain composition over time. And that composition underneath our skin, we're all made up of fat, muscle, and bone. And a certain ratio of them, there's what we have our calendar age, but also our body has what's called a metabolic age. So I'm currently calendar years 41 years young, but my metabolic age says I'm 26 or 27. And how do we achieve that? Well, once we understand what we're made of as a starting point, how much fat do we have, how much muscle and the bone, we then can figure out what is the optimal fat percentage I need, what is the optimal muscle mass, and we create a plan to have you get us there. And so what we really want to look at is what are the foods that contribute to boosting our fat. So some people watching might say, but Ronnie, you don't understand. I have what's called stubborn fat. There's nothing called stubborn fat. What we have is an acidic body. And an acidic environment is good for holding fat cells. So one of the first things we do in our program is we alkalize the body, because research has shown that alkalinity in our body boosts the oxygen within our body, boosts our energy, and also boosts our metabolism, which means how quickly our body responds or converts food into one of three things, which is energy, fat, or muscle. And we can rewire that and we can biohack that through natural options such as food and the timing of our food intake and a certain moderate amount of exercise or movement.
So, Ronnie, could I ask you then about educating ourselves and education, not medication, because medication is the easiest thing to turn to. People suffering from obesity, diabetes, which is paramount, a huge subject, and we've even been discussing it here on the Great Big Indian Wellness Show. Education, not medication, because it is possible to reverse diabetes, if I'm not mistaken.
It absolutely is. So what is diabetes? There's type 1, there's type 2. And type 2 simply says it is lifestyle cause. It's a lifestyle disease. So what we do is if we work on rewiring the lifestyle, we drop off the disease. And there is a resigned view out there, which even I had when I was unwell, which is somebody asked me, how's your health and how's your health care? I'll just say it's all good. I got great insurance and my company takes care of me. If anything happens to me, I'll get the best medical treatment or my family is taken care of. That is a view where somebody else should be responsible for your health. And what we educate you on is you need to understand the principles of your body. You need to understand principles of food. And if you know and understand how they work inside of you, then you'll make much informed, educated, intellectual decisions around what am I going to consume now? What impact does it have to my blood sugar? What impact then does it or demands will it have on this hormone called insulin? And if I can avoid the foods that create the blood sugar spike and therefore the insulin spike, guess what? I can exist in a condition that some people call post-diabetic, and they no longer have that surge in blood sugar. They no longer have that chronic insulin high, and they are, for lack of a better word, free of diabetes or diabetic symptoms. And we've had many people who've gone from type 2 or pre-diabetic to reversing that, or moms who got gestational diabetes during pregnancy to completely reversing that. And we've had people do that in their 70s. We now have an 82-year-old German client on our program. And my 76-year-old dad, from as far back as we can remember, he's been on medication. At the age of 70, he takes on my program, and he's now 76. And 5 years, he's been asked by the medical doctors to discontinue his high BP medication, his cholesterol statins, his daily aspirin, and 22 pills in total that he used to have. And now he's free of that medication, but he lives a new lifestyle with a certain amount of movement, with wiser choices around what he consumes, and he experiences optimal health. And that's what we're committed to for everyone that we can get to serve and make a difference to.
Well, that's an incredible inspirational story you've just shared with us. So thank you for that, Ronnie Rich. And as the co-CEO and founder of FitBanker, as we part company, what's your message for those people who are joining us today on the Great Big Indian Wellness Show? Because there's a lot to take away from today's discussion and the great advice you've just shared with us here today. What can we take away from today, and what are your top tips that you can share as we close the program?
All right, amazing. I think the first thing I'm going to say for everyone that wants to look at or considering exploring transforming your health is I or anyone that has taken on transforming the health is no natural athlete, is no natural sports person, doesn't have no natural physique. All we are is somebody that got connected internally to, I'm going to start saying, the biggest advice I'll say is please focus inward on yourselves and get connected to why you really matter to those around you. And when you get really connected to that, then you will be empowered to get why you ought to bank on your fitness, whether it's your kids, whether it's elderly parents, whether it's employees in your company as an entrepreneur, whatever your vision or mission may be in this world. If you get truly connected to how relevant and valuable you are, then you know it's time for me to look at what do I need to change or transform. Otherwise, there's no context to take action. When it comes to diet, at minimum, I would say, and you can look up what are high glycemic index carbs. Basically, foods that when we consume very quickly turn to blood sugar. And there's a list that we give you to say avoid a host of these high glycemic index carbs because they only give you short-term spikes of energy, and then they lead to a crash, and then they're the first start of what we call inflammation in the body or inflammatory foods. So avoiding high glycemic index carbs in our body, but having more complex carbs is one of the small tweaks you can make immediately. And the third one I would say is as minimum as walking. Start to walk at least 10,000 or 12,000 or 14,000 steps a day. And any transformation journey begins with as little as and as light as walking as an activity. Of course, there are more advanced training plans and programs we can offer and support you with, but without knowing your conditions, your goals, your aspirations, at a minimum, if you're listening in, I'd say make walking a daily part of your day and aim for a certain number of step goals.
Ronnie Rich, thank you very much indeed for sharing your time and advice with us today on the science of transformative health right here on the Great Big Indian Wellness Show. Thank you so much.